blockchains, able to be used globally, redeemable only with US entities that are doing KYC and AML, where we have all the original data and can use blockchain analytics. What is going to happen? You are going to have people in many economies that are much more mismanaged than the United States flocking to the dollar. It increases dollar dominance and usage. It increases the pool of funding for the Treasury, and it increases our ability to enforce sanctions.
Yeah, because I've been hearing stories out of Latin America of folks using USDC. Obviously, a lot of them dealing with hyperinflation. So having a standardized stable coin, if you want to call it that, would be incredible for the world reserve currency of the US dollar to maintain that status.
And that is exactly it, right? Like, if you're in Argentina and your choices are the Argentine peso or Tether, you're going to use Tether.
Yeah.
But if your choice were the Argentine peso or maybe something like PayPal's US dollar or Tether, you might prefer PayPal's US dollar. Now imagine we can create a properly reserved interest-bearing version of that, right? Again, you can see how this would project dollar dominance throughout the world and sort of serve as a check on the worst behavior of central banks elsewhere. Because as much as people hate on the dollar, and look, there are plenty of reasons to hate on the dollar, there are a lot of other things you can hate on way more. It may be the situation that the dollar is a little bit like Churchill on democracy, which is the worst option except for all the others, right? But, it is a tool to get it to people who otherwise have a hard time getting their hands on it.
What are your thoughts on this? I know I'm branching off a little bit here, but, there's a lot of talks that UBI is going to be needed because tech is eating up jobs, AI, and so forth. It's a process. It doesn't happen overnight, but eventually people are not going to be able to earn a living. There's just not going to be the jobs. And there's talks of universal basic income. I know the folks at WorldCoin are trying to do something like this. But to your point, if we have this regulated stable coin and that is on multiple chains and it's globally distributed, that could be an avenue that the U.S. government uses to provide UBI. I don't know.
Yeah, so I think the UBI discussion really should be separated, right? Because one is what are the rails and the other one is what do we want to pay people for, right? And paying people effectively presupposes good rails, but there's a lot of pro stablecoin arguments that are not pro UBI and a lot of pro UBI arguments that are not pro stablecoin. So one of the things I'm big on in this space, especially with regard to stablecoins, is trying to stay laser focused on what are we doing here. So my comment on that would be, sure, you could use them for UBI. There's a lot of other things you could use for UBI, but the reason to promote use stablecoins really has to do with eliminating intermediaries, transparency, reducing the dominance of the GSIB banks, right, and trying to get to a safer system that's less run prone. There are many financial markets upgrades here, and I would put that probably 100 or lower on my list of items.
Sure. Now, Austin, despite everything we've talked about, the challenges, the SEC and so forth, I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was something in the air, but BlackRock all of a sudden said, we want a Bitcoin spot ETF. That line grew around the block. Franklin Templeton, some of the biggest names on Wall Street came in. You saw crypto exchanges being launched by Fidelity and Charles Schwab and these folks, and much more. MasterCard, Visa, all these guys doing their thing. Are we at that institutional tipping point? Are the cards on the table and now they're all here ready to take part?
So one thing I'll say is it really depends on what you mean by tipping point. As a general rule of thumb for financial markets transformation, it will take a lot longer than people think, but the impact will be much larger than people think. So I would tell you we're probably at a tipping point for people wanting to offer spot ETFs. That seems pretty obvious. And I think Grayscale's fight with the SEC is a lot of the driver for that, where the writing on the wall is becoming obvious. Do I think they're ready to jump into crypto wholesale? No. And more to the point, I'm not sure they ever will. It may be the case that a little bit like the early internet, a lot of what's been built is really cool experiments, but most of it's not going to last. Right. And that the blockchain we're going to be using 20 years from now to exchange like value, or many blockchains most likely, have not even yet been created. Right. And so one view I hold, is I think people will launch spot ETFs. They'll continue to experiment in the space. the things I'm sure of are tokenized assets are going to be a thing and they will be traded because there's huge value to the technology when you really understand the details. And that two, I think a lot of